Too often today, when traders need help the most, their call is met with numbers to press on the phone instead of an actual person.
Advantage prioritizes you.
Personalized service, competitive pricing, aimed at giving you every advantage.
Make us your advantage.
Advantage Futures.
What I thought I wanted to be is not who I am today, right? When I graduated college, I went to school in Washington, D.C. I wanted to study political science. I wanted to be, a lobbyist and then a politician and then ultimately the president of the United States. And thank God none of that came true, right? Because when I was in college, my freshman year in Washington, D.C., I had the opportunity to go and intern on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange. Now, I'm not a kid from New York. I was a kid from Boston. I had no idea what the New York Stock Exchange was. I didn't know a stock from a bond, a buy from, sell, an eighth from a quarter. I knew nothing. But I had this opportunity to get down there and spend the summer as an intern. And I thought to myself, my first reaction was absolutely not. Who wants to move to New York City in the summertime as a 19-year-old kid when I had every intention of going back to Cape Cod? Because I grew up outside of Boston, but I spent my summers on the Cape, and I was going to go back to Cape Cod and be a lifeguard at 19 years old after I freshman year. Well, could there be anything better than that? So my first reaction was to say no, I wasn't going to do it. And then during the second semester of my freshman year, I was thinking about it. I did a little bit of homework on it. And I go, you know what? What's the worst that's going to happen? The worst that's going to happen is I'm going to get there. I'm going to have this experience and I'm not going to like it. And I'll chalk it up and I'll be able to put on my resume and say, okay. Or I could go there and who knows, it could change the course of my life. And it absolutely changed the course of my life. I was there for about 4 weeks. I was absolutely head over heels, crazed about the New York Stock Exchange, what happened there, the people, the personalities, the excitement, everything about it was just thrilling for me. And so when I was, 19 years old, or 18, I said, this is what I want to do. And it was all because, and I tell this story a lot when I speak to kids in college or even kids that are going into college, is that because you and I are the same age, right? But you make decisions along the way in your life, right? You never know which decision takes you one way, which decision takes you another way, whatever, right? And this was a decision I made. My first reaction was to say no. And had I stuck with that reaction and never had that opportunity, I have no idea today where I would have been, because I probably would have stayed in Washington and become a politician or a lobbyist, right? Because that's what I want. That was my first reaction. That was my first desire. But I made this decision because it was offered to me, and all of a sudden I made the decision, and that decision forever changed the course of my life. I was there the summer of 1980. I went back the summer of 81. I went back the summer of 82. And I was there. Now, you'll remember this. It was right after the Jimmy Carter years. Ronald Reagan was president. They just had passed the Reagan reform package. Paul Volcker was Fed chair. Interest rates were 20%. Mortgages were running at 16%. Unemployment was 13%. And inflation was 10%. Do you remember that? Okay. So that was all during the time you and I were in college, 80, 81, 82, right? Summer of 81. I went back to summer of 82. Now, I was there at the New York Stock Exchange on Tuesday, August 17th. And I say that with such conviction because that was the day the greatest bull market that this country has ever known was born. That was the day the Fed came out and made a surprise Tuesday morning announcement that Paul Volcker came out and said rates were 20%, right? 21%. Paul Volcker came out and said that the Fed was going to break the back of inflation, break the back of unemployment. They were going to cut interest rates by 10%, which was 2 percentage points. Do you remember that? And do you remember what happened on that day? The market the market was up 4.5%. We were up 35 points on the Dow because the Dow was trading at 792. Today it's trading at 35,000, right? Then it was trading at 792. Paul Volcker came out and made that announcement. And what did it do? It forced money. I mean, he drew the line in the sand, and he was going to bring interest rates down. And so this guaranteed 20% of money in the bank wasn't going to be anymore. And so there was this massive exodus, and that was the birth of the greatest bull market. And I was there that day. And I remember how the phones just never stopped ringing, and the excitement and the energy. It was so exciting. And it's a good thing I was only 19 years old, because, now I got to pee every 2 hours, right? Because I'm 60. Then I could hold it all day, right? And so you stood, and you know what the flow was like. I had this much space, just as wide as my shoulders. I had 2 phones in front of me, and a desk that had a buy pad, a sell pad, a cancellation pad, and a report pad, and a time clock. And you stood there all day and answered the phone, and you took orders, and you gave reports, and it was all very exciting. The broker that I was working for at the time, I was going back into my senior year in college in September of 1982. And he didn't want me to leave. And he said to me, why don't you just stay here and work? Why don't you transfer? You can go to NYU at night. You can fit. I go, and I know myself. First of all, I would never have been able to work there all day and then go to school at night. I had 1 year left. I had already spent, $30,000, $10,000 a year. So he said to me, and he was a guy, he was at the time 45 years old. He was a kid that grew up in Rosedale, Queens, had never gone to college, couldn't go to college, got a job at the New York Stock Exchange as a runner when he was 17 years old, worked his way up, right, became a member of the New York Stock Exchange. But he said to me, I get it, right? I get it. So go back to school. And when you graduate in May 1983, so 9 months out, he offered me a job paying me $36,000 a year, which was in 1983, $36,000 a year, a lot of money, right? So I moved back to Boston. I went to my senior year in college at Boston University. I had the greatest year of my life, because I had this job upon graduation that I was absolutely in love with. But other kids that I was going to school with that were, they were all filling out resumes and trying to go on interviews and all that stuff. And I didn't do any of that. And so here's the older me now telling the younger me, that was probably a mistake. I probably should have forced myself to write a resume and go on interviews just for the experience, if nothing else, even though I had the job I wanted. But I probably should have given myself, listen, who knows? Who knows if I had made that decision to do that? Maybe I would have gotten a job offer at Goldman Sachs and been, some big wig at Goldman Sachs today. I have no idea. But one way or the other, I went back to college my senior year. I graduated May of 83. I went to Italy for the month of June, and I moved to New York in July of 1983 for honestly what I thought was going to be a couple of years. I thought I was going to go there, get some experience, and then I was going to pick that experience up and move back to Boston, where my whole family lived. Right, I'm one of 5. I'm the middle of 5 kids from a Boston Italian family, and so I just thought to myself, okay, I'll stay here for a couple of years and then I'll move back. Well, that didn't happen. I met my wife at the New York Stock Exchange, who herself was a member of the New York Stock Exchange at a time when there were a handful of female members. Next thing you know, we got married. She had her business, I had my business, and she got pregnant, and then the rest is history from there. So the guy that I had been working for, right, I was his clerk. When I came back to work after I graduated, I went to work for him. He was an independent broker, and I was his clerk. And so that was 1983. And by 1985, the business was just booming, right? He had more business than he could handle. So he just grew. So what he did was I never owned a seat. My biggest regret in my life was never having bought a seat. But here's the problem. In order to buy a seat, you had to pay cash for the seat. You couldn't mortgage a seat the way you can mortgage a house. You had to pay cash for it. And in 1985, when I was 24 years old, when I had the opportunity to become a member, seats were trading at $350,000. And I didn't have $350,000. I just bought a house. We just had a baby. I had a car and all that other shit that I couldn't afford to buy the seat, but I could afford to lease the seat, right? Because you could lease the seat. And the seat cost me $5,000 a month to lease. But I didn't own it. So you owned the seat. You are now retired, living in Florida. I worked your seat, and every month I wrote you a check for $5,000. Right? That's how that works. But I ended up leasing the seat my whole career. I don't ask why. I can't even come up with honestly a reasonable answer why I never bought a seat. I just. Yes. So I brought in some friends into the market, kids that I had gone to school with, young guys that I had met during, as I was a newbie in New York, I'd go out, what you did, you went out, you networked, you met people, what you do, blah, blah, blah. And, it took a certain personality, right? You had to be a type A personality to work on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange. You couldn't be a type B. You were going to get run over if you were type B. And so And so during my time, yes, I reached out to people that I thought would make a difference or be successful down there, and brought them in. And then as I got even older, I started to mentor. Like when I was running the floor for Solomon back in 1995, 96, 97. Solomon had a mentorship program also that I was involved with. So we'd go out and we'd mentor kids and do all that stuff. So yeah, it was all very exciting. I got up with the same excitement in 2015 that I did in 1998. I just couldn't wait. I would jump out of bed every morning. So my hearing is fine. I always talk loud, but my loud voice actually was a benefit on the floor of the exchange because everybody could hear me, right? I don't have feet and back problems. It has not taken a negative toll on me at all. And I'm 60 now. My wife is a couple years older than me, and so she'd been down there. She started out as a runner. She was a kid who, she was born. My wife is Puerto Rican, so she was born in Puerto Rico. She moved here when she was 3. She grew up in Brooklyn. When she graduated high school, she got a job as a runner on the New York Stock Exchange. No family member, no aunt, no uncle, no father, no nothing in the business. But she was a street smart kid, right? That's what you had to be. You had to have street smart. You had to be able to read a crowd. You had to be able to. It was like you had to be able to play poker, right? Because you had to be able to know when somebody was bluffing and not, and read the crowd and understand what was happening. And so she became a member actually ahead of me. She became a member in 1984. We weren't married yet. We got married in October of 85. So she got her seat in April of 84. She had the opportunity to get a seat in April of 84 as an independent member. And she had her own business. She was out in the Blue Room, which was one of the trading rooms. Now, she very much did the same type of business, institutional. She was doing a lot of arbitrage business at the time, like the Ivan Boesky type business, the big arbitrage business. And I was doing more of the institutional business. Wasn't so much arbitrage. It was just servicing big asset managers around the country, initiating. But I'll tell you the greatest part about her being a member there as well is that we understood the stresses on each other, right? We understood what it was like. Like we could go home at night and talk about, I could say, look, here's what happened to me today. And I was in this crowd and so we could talk about it. And then she would tell me. And so it actually helped. It actually was at the very core of our foundation in terms of our relationship, because she so understood and I so understood what she was doing and what I was doing. There were a lot of couples, the husband does one thing, the wife does another, and the wife can't relate to the husband can't relate to the wife. And, that comes out years later. Today, even though she doesn't do it anymore, I can come home from work and we can have this conversation and she gets it still. She understands it. We're able to talk about it. But in terms of risk, she tends to be a little bit more conservative than I do in terms of investing. But over the years, look, I'm 60 now. So when I was younger, I was much more aggressive in terms of my style of investing. She was always tended to be a little bit more conservative. But now that, I'm 60 and she's 62, we tend now to fall into each other and be a little bit more conservative at this point, I probably would have taken my CFA exam because back in 1980, I should have taken it. I debated taking the CFA exam in 1983 after I got out. I took my Series 7, right, in 83 when I got out of college, and I debated taking my CFA exam. But I was so thrilled with the markets. It was so exciting to go there. By the end of the day, I was exhausted. Like I made a conscious decision. I was like, I can't do this all day and then try to go and study for 4 hours a night, go to school and sit in some classroom and then study. And then I was excited because I met my wife. I was getting married. We were traveling, doing all that stuff. Today, as I look back, I probably would have tried to spend more time getting a CFA. I would have put that first, right? The world changed, right? Technology really did away. That job doesn't exist anymore. The job that I did no longer exists. People trade algorithmically, electronically, and the floor went from 5,500 type A personalities in 5 rooms trading 3,200 stocks to less than 200 people in one room at 2.5 posts trading 3,200 stocks, and it all happens electronically. And so I lost interest because what I went there for, the excitement. You remember what it was like in a trading crowd, and you're talking to the clients, and you're right in the thick of the crowd, and all that went away. And so, and I knew, that all went away like in 2005 and 6 is really when it started to when it started to really disappear, once they did Reagan MS and they modernized the markets, and that open outcry died. But then I got involved in the institution. I got involved in the media. I started doing a lot of television commentary right directly from the floor of the exchange. And so and I would love doing that, right? Because I just show me a camera. I don't love, right? And so that kind of kept me involved. But then the technology, after the market crashed in 2007 and 8, and then, Goldman Sachs and UBS and First Boston designed these algorithmic programs that sat as an icon on clients' desks. And so the client, you as the portfolio manager at XYZ hedge fund, now could just click on your Goldman icon and you could enter your own order there directly into the Goldman trading desk and never speak to a human being again. And the order would get executed, and boom, by the end of the day, you had your average price, you had everything you needed. And so the job got eliminated. My job got eliminated. And I fought like hell because I thought it was the greatest place in the world. And I fought like hell. But ultimately, I was a one-man operation. I wasn't Goldman Sachs. I wasn't a one-man operation. There were 5 of us. But, Goldman Sachs has billions of dollars to spend on technology, as does JP Morgan, First Boston, UBS. And so, the little guy gets squeezed out, and that's exactly what they did. And so the market structure today, and a lot of that was also a result of the events of 9/11, right? As well as I do, the events of 9/11 forever changed the narrative in the country and in the industry. And, up until 9/11 happened, we were using technology to create, how can we make it more efficient? How can we use technology to create efficiency? The conversation wasn't about security and stability. Post 9/11, all of a sudden, the whole country woke up and said, holy shit, we missed the boat on this. We should be using technology to create security and stability, and then finally efficiency. And so the whole conversation, that event, changed the whole narrative in the country. Now, it took a number of years for it to happen, but ultimately, the technology just wiped out the exchange as we knew it. The New York Stock Exchange today still exists, and I think it will still continue to exist, but it doesn't exist in the same way that it existed, right? And the other 10 exchanges that exist are all completely electronic. They trade in the cloud. They don't trade. There's no physical location. And so therefore, the world changed. And look, during COVID, the New York Stock Exchange actually shut down for 8 weeks. And if you didn't know, you would never have known, because the markets continued to function. Why? Because it all traded in the cloud, right? It was perfectly okay. And I understand, as an American, post 9/11, that's exactly what should have happened. So I fully support it. Because remember, when 9/11 happened, the New York Stock Exchange was where it all traded. If they had flown a plane into downtown Manhattan, like into the exchange, they would have brought this country to its knees for a whole lot longer than the 6 days that we were brought to our knees. And so therefore, that necessitated the change in market structure. And so for me, it was just a matter of, I hung on and hung on and hung on until I finally said, you know what, it's no fun for me anymore. And so I pivoted. And when I left New York, my kids were grown. And when I left New York, I moved to Florida, and I launched my financial consulting business and chief market strategist at a $1 billion plus RIA and a wealth advisor. And so, I take all this experience and knowledge and now educate with it. I'm a public speaker. I still do my television, and I do this. Oh my God. How much time do you have? Because we could sit here and talk for days. It was I think the greatest memories all centered around the personalities, right? Because the exchange was made up of 5,500 type A personalities. And it was all of those personalities that brought life to the exchange. And then it was all the personalities of all the people that were sending order flow into the exchange. So the traders at First Boston, the traders at Goldman, the traders at Solomon, the traders at UBS, the traders at the regional broker dealers that happened, right? It was all the personalities. But, listen, I was there during the crash of 87. I was 26. That's a memory that, I remember it like it was yesterday. I was there during the tech boom of the 90s, which was an absolutely amazing place to be. Now, the dot-com bubble and crash of 99 and 2000, that all happened in NASDAQ. Remember, none of those stocks were listed at the New York Stock Exchange. And so people say to me, what was it like then? Well, I never traded those stocks because we couldn't trade those stocks at the New York Stock Exchange. And so that was happening kind of around me, but it didn't actually happen to me. 9/11 was certainly, 9/11 was a whole nother event that on the one hand is sad, but in retrospect, it was amazing that I was actually there at that critical historical moment that changed the world, right? I mean, that was it's really an amazing memory. As difficult as it is, it was an amazing memory to have. But it was really the enjoyment of it was the excitement of the business and the people and the personalities and the way you and I could be best friends, but we're representing, you're representing a seller, I'm representing a buyer in IBM, and we're fighting all day long. But then the bell rings at 4:00. I say, John, come on, let's go out and let's go grab a steak at Harry's. And, and we would go out and have a steak at Harry's. And it was if, we'd talk about the day, we'd talk about, the whatever, but it was just the friendships and the camaraderie. And, I have some of the greatest friends in my life are guys that I worked with at the New York Stock Exchange. I mean, that I haven't, some of them now, because some of them started to fall off the rolls in 2003, 2004, 2005. But yet you pick up the phone and you call them, and I may not have seen them in 2 or 3 years, but they're like those relationships you have that you pick up the phone. It was like, I saw you yesterday. I think the worst memory of the trading floor when I lost $1.5 million in a trade. And it was like a combination trade. But the fact was, I wasn't even there that day. I was on vacation, and my partner was there. And right on the opening, it got completely screwed up, and he knew it did. And my phone rang at 9:31, and it was in the summer. It was in August. I was on my way out to Long Island, and he called me up in near panic. And he said to me, I don't know what happened, but this trade is completely fucked up, and this is going to cost us a lot of money. And so I dropped everything I had, and I went into work, and I tried to figure out what had happened. And by the end of the day, it cost $1.5 million. It was a very, very expensive lesson. It was a very expensive lesson. I really actually thought that was going to be the end of my career on that day. That how the fuck am I ever going to pay this? How are we going to do this? And so, but we made it through. I mean, there was a lot of negotiation. There was the insurance fund, the broker's insurance fund that provided about $600,000 worth of the error, and then the other $500,000 had to work off. But you know what? Now I can tell that story and kind of get a chuckle out of it, because somebody says, you did what? Yeah, I lost $1.5 million. I mean, so the market and the ability to make money was very much like the economy. When the economy was doing good, stocks were trading, people, but activity was happening. When the economy was in a downdraft or was in a recession, then the volume of trading also retracted. And so therefore in the good times, there was a huge opportunity. And remember, although rates had become unfixed in the mid 70s, they were still, when I went there was that you were a $2 broker, right? So you get paid $2 per 100 shares that you executed, which was huge, because today you're getting paid 30 cents for every 100 shares you execute. Then you're getting paid $2 a share for every share you executed, right? And so it was a tremendous opportunity to be able to make money. And if you did a good job and you were respected in the crowd, you were respected by the brokers, it clearly transcended. Customers knew that, right? And so customers would reach out to you. Because remember that the floor was so big, you didn't cover the whole floor. I worked in a very specific zone. I worked in the main room at post 8, 10, and 11. So the stocks that were at those 3 posts. Now, could I go to any other post? Of course I could. But why would you call me in the main room to go trade a stock that was in the expanded blue room? By the time I got out there, the trade, I missed the trade. So it was always about the stocks you were closest to is how you did the business. And so, we did business for all the big houses. We did it for Goldman and for Boston and for Salomon Brothers. And so, and there was a lot of business to be had. And if you were good at what you did, and naturally you networked and you entertained and you did all the things that you would do to build a network, the way you do in any industry, if you did it right, it provided a very good living for a lot of people.
Advantage Futures is proud to sponsor this JLN video series. In many of the series videos, there are recurring themes of people being helped at critical times in their trading careers. Too often today, when traders need help the most, their call is met with numbers to press on the phone instead of an actual person. At Advantage, you are our priority. Everyone needs an edge or advantage when trading. Make us your advantage.
John Lothian News would like to thank those individuals who have contributed to our Markets for Key Education GoFundMe campaign. Their financial assistance allows us to produce and distribute videos like this for our Open Outcry Traders History Project or the Path to Electronic Trading video series. Join them in supporting John Lothian News, capturing the history of our industry.